Rumination. This is the name for the loop your mind enters when it keeps returning to the same thought over and over without reaching any conclusion. Maybe it's something someone said earlier, or a decision you already made, or a mistake from last week. You're not trying to solve it, you're just circling it again and again, like a record stuck on the same line. The strange part is that rumination feels productive while it's happening. It feels like thinking, but it rarely leads anywhere new. The same thought returns in the same shape, carrying the same weight, and the only thing that changes is how tired you feel afterward. Researchers have found that rumination is one of the strongest predictors of low mood, not because the thoughts themselves are dangerous, but because the mind mistakes repetition for resolution. The loop only breaks when something else demands attention, and even then, it often picks up again later, exactly where it left off, sometimes returning years after the original moment has lost any real importance to anyone except the person still replaying it. Catastrophizing. This happens when a small, ordinary problem suddenly expands into the worst possible outcome inside your head. You send a message and they don't reply for a few hours. Within minutes, your mind has built an entire story. They're upset with you, the friendship is changing, something is wrong. None of this is based on evidence. It's based on a pattern where the brain jumps from a tiny, uncertain detail straight to the most extreme conclusion it can imagine. The jump happens so fast that it doesn't feel like a thought. It feels like a fact. And once that worst case scenario is sitting in your mind, it's hard to think about anything else until it's either confirmed or disproven. Most of the time, the actual reason turns out to be something completely ordinary. But by then, the hours of worry have already happened. Analysis paralysis. This is what happens when you have too many options and instead of choosing one, you freeze completely. You want to order food, but every choice feels equally fine and equally wrong. You want to reply to a message, but you keep rewriting it because none of the versions feel right. The irony is that having more choices should make decisions easier, but it often does the opposite. The brain starts comparing every option against every other option, searching for the perfect one. And because there's rarely a single perfect option, the search never finishes. Time passes, nothing gets chosen, and the simple task quietly becomes a source of stress. Eventually, the decision often gets made by default, whichever option is easiest to fall back on, or whichever choice someone else makes first. Decision fatigue. This is the gradual exhaustion that builds after making too many decisions in a single day. Early in the morning, choices feel easy: what to wear, what to eat, how to respond to a message. These come naturally. But by the evening, even small decisions start to feel heavy. What to eat for dinner suddenly feels like a real problem. This isn't about willpower. The brain has a limited capacity for decision making, and each choice draws from the same mental resource. By the time you reach the end of the day, that resource is running low, and even simple choices start to feel like effort. This is part of why so many people end up eating the same meal repeatedly or wearing the same outfit, not out of habit, but because choosing anything new takes energy that's already gone, the what if spiral. This is a specific kind of overthinking where one uncertain thought leads directly into another, and then another, each one slightly worse than the last. What if I said the wrong thing? What if they took it badly? What if this affects how they see me from now on? What if it comes up again later? Each question creates the next one, and there's no natural stopping point. The spiral doesn't end because you found an answer. It ends because something else interrupts it, like a phone ringing or a task pulling your attention away. Until that happens, the mind keeps generating new branches, each one built entirely on imagination rather than anything that's actually happened. Looking back later, most of these branches turn out to have never been real possibilities at all. Mind reading. This is the habit of assuming you know exactly what someone else is thinking, usually about you. Someone gives a short reply and you immediately decide they're annoyed. Someone doesn't smile back the way they usually do, and you assume something is wrong between you. The brain treats these assumptions as if they were information, even though they're guesses built from a single small detail. Most of the time, the other person's actual thoughts have nothing to do with you at all. They might be tired, distracted, or simply thinking about something unrelated. But because the assumption feels so certain, it's rarely questioned and instead becomes the starting point for an entire chain of overthinking that the other person never even knew was happening. Perfectionism paralysis. This is what happens when the standard you're holding yourself to is so high that starting feels impossible. You want to write something, but the first sentence doesn't feel good enough, so you delete it and try again. You want to begin a project, but you keep waiting until you feel fully prepared, which never quite arrives. The work itself isn't the problem. The gap between what you can realistically produce right now and what you imagine as the ideal version is the problem. And that gap can feel so large that not starting begins to feel safer than starting and falling short of it. The unfinished version in your head stays perfect for as long as it stays unfinished. Bedtime overthinking. This is the experience of lying down at night, finally still, and suddenly having your mind become louder than it was all day. During the day, there's enough happening to keep your attention occupied. But at night, with nothing left to distract you, thoughts that were pushed aside earlier start surfacing one after another. A conversation from days ago, something you need to do tomorrow, a worry you hadn't fully looked at. None of these thoughts are new. They were there all along, waiting for a quiet moment to be noticed. And night happens to be the quietest moment most people have. By morning, many of these same thoughts feel smaller again, simply because the rest of the world is awake and moving along with you. Social comparison loop. This is the pattern of measuring your own life against other people's, usually without realizing how often it happens. You see someone achieve something, and almost instantly your mind places your own situation next to theirs. Are you behind? Are you doing enough? Should you be further along by now? These comparisons happen so quickly that they don't feel like comparisons. They feel like simple observations. But the comparison is rarely fair because you're comparing your full, complicated reality to a single visible moment of someone else's life, stripped of all its own background and struggle. The version of their life you're comparing yourself to is usually the most polished part of it, while the version of your own life you're judging is the entire thing. Imposter syndrome. This is the persistent feeling that you don't actually deserve the position, recognition, or success you've achieved, and that at some point, people will realize it. Even with clear evidence of skill or effort, the feeling doesn't go away. Compliments feel like they're aimed at someone else. Achievements feel like luck, timing, or other people simply not noticing yet. The thoughts are not always about being inadequate. Sometimes they're about waiting, quietly expecting the moment when everyone else sees what you believe is the truth underneath. What makes this particularly persistent is that success doesn't resolve it. If anything, each new achievement raises the stakes because now there's even more that could be discovered to be undeserved. And the gap between how things appear from the outside and how they feel on the inside only seems to grow wider with time.